YouTube, how's it going? And welcome back to AJ's Garage. I just want to say thank you to all the new subscribers. I really appreciate your guys' interest in the channel and hope you like the content so far. Getting into this one, I am going to try to do this a little differently than my last few videos. I noticed that I was kind of explaining what I was going to do but not really showing any of it. And that is difficult to do sometimes depending on the type of project. But with this one, I feel like I will be able to show you guys a lot. It might not be directly connected to what you're working on with your truck, but this is just something that I have to fix on mine, so let's get started. Just in case for anyone that's never removed a fender off of their truck, it really is quite easy unless your truck's never been apart before, which mine wasn't when I took it apart about 3 years ago to remove the transmission, fix some of the suspension, and just some general cleanup work. When I did that, a lot of these bolts were super stuck. It took me forever. I fought every single one almost. This time, of course, they came out pretty easily. So there's 1, 2, and 3 on the core support, and then there's also 3 on the front grille. I did remove the headlight bezel just to get it out of the way. Once you remove those, there's one up here which you can reach in, and I'll show you guys where that one's at. And then of course the one underneath here that we showed on the lower trim video. But on this side, just double check, there's kind of 2 sets, especially this one that's in at an angle on the fender. But what we're gonna work on is that. And of course, from here, it's not really too big of a deal, or a big deal I should say, because you're not going to see it. It's behind the fender. But we move inside, and let me grab a light. We have a spot on the kick panel there that is rusted through. So of course, when I'm driving, I'm on the freeway, wind just comes through. If it's cold, it's not too big of a deal, but I just want to fix it, of course. So we are going to remove this section of the heater box. I'm not sure if I'm going to remove it completely, but we're going to start with that there. And going back to this outer piece, what I'm actually going to do is probably cut some of this out and then of course weld it back in. So I've debated on doing that, kind of went back and forth with it, but I just want to see what's in there. It'll give me kind of easier access to the other side. That way I can put a few tack welds on this side if I need to, some seam sealer, and then also coat it with some POR 15. Now, I'm assuming when the truck wasn't on the road, it was kind of leaned on its right, or these tires went flat, leaves accumulated in here, and that's where the rust came from. This side of the truck, especially up here in the roof and the door, there's kind of more rust, whereas on the driver's side, everything looks a little bit cleaner and neater. So let's cut this open and see what it looks like back there. So here's the cutout section from the cab. Getting a closer view, you can see the rust, and there's even some tiny holes going up that way. So once we get finished up with all the work here, we'll probably cut this up, weld the good metal back in, and then just create a patch section for the bottom half, and then figure something out with this. Getting a view in here, you can tell the rust has gone through in a few areas. I'm not too concerned with it. I do plan on applying a little POR 15. I also found another product from POR 15 called Patch. It is a filler and seam sealer, and this you can directly apply over rust. I am going to clean it up though before I apply. And where I'm going to put that is right up against the replacement piece, where that seam is, just so that any water or moisture or anything doesn't collect and sit in there, and then we have the same problem again. But next step would be to remove the vent there, and I have an idea of how I'm gonna put the patch in that'll probably make it easier for me with my limited welding experience. That overlapping piece there, I'm gonna cut a little bit over and keep that so that it's kind of a backing plate. Same thing here on the bottom. So I will cut the bad metal out down to about here. That way I have a back to put the piece up in here and kind of hide some of my welding. So that should make it a lot easier. But moving inside, I already got some of the bolts removed from this, so this technically should come right off. And I've never removed this. I've had my heater box out to replace my heater core and ended up just cleaning up the original and reusing that. So, well, I might not be able to get this off unless I take the heater core out, but it'll be easier with two hands, so give me a second. So as you guys can tell, the vent is removed, and just like with everything that hasn't been off the truck, we find some of the original Wimbledon white behind it. But I did get started on removing the rust, and of course behind that there's more rust. If you guys watched my replacement floor pan video, PUR 15 is a 3-step process. Now, I'm not going to coat any of this with PUR 15, but the degreaser and the metal prep, the 2 steps before applying the actual PUR 15, clean everything up really well, and then the metal prep kind of etches the metal and removes all the rust. You have to keep the area wet for about 10 to 15 minutes, I believe, and then it takes it down to bare metal and converts it. So once we do that, I will spray it with some weld through primer, and then of course when we apply that seam sealer along the backside, nothing should drip through down here at the bottom. But my Dremel, which I was using to get kind of up in this tighter space up here to cut this piece out, the battery died. So we're gonna have to charge that overnight and continue on it again another day, but just about there. Then we'll get the patch piece welded in and everything sealed up. Before I call it quits for the night, I completely forgot that this came in today. So let's take a look, show you guys what's coming up on the channel. Of course, I obviously know what I ordered, but it is a little heavier than I expected. Start with some of the smaller things. I ordered some firewall grommets, which looks like, I don't know if I ordered the wrong one or looked at the wrong one, but this one would be right along the top of the cab underneath the hood. And I thought I was getting the little grommets for the actual firewall. That's what it did say, firewall grommet. So I ordered a few of these. Obviously, I might as well just replace them on the 70 F250 and then the dually. And then speaking of the dually, I did order new cargo lights. One of these was pretty banged up, so I ordered a replacement. Actually ordered two, just figured I'd replace the next one that was the most banged up. And then I also got new lenses for the rest of them, along with new bulbs. Just something about those cargo lights, I just really like the look of it. So I'm getting a little more attached to that truck as the work continues. So you guys will see this in an upcoming video. We'll be replacing those. And then also the windshield gasket for the dually. A lot heavier than I thought it would be, but pretty much on all four corners of the dually windshield, there's cracks and chunks of the gasket missing. So with cold weather upon us, at least in California Central Valley, it's going to start to get cold, and hopefully we get some good rain this year. I don't want any water getting into the cab, of course, and causing any more problems. So this is what's coming up on the channel. So this is as far as I'm going to take the metal prep. It definitely did its job up in here, but there was just some really heavy pitting. So I took the Dremel and kind of took some areas down and got it down to bare metal a lot faster. I'll show you guys what it looks like in here, but it's pretty bad also. That's going to be coated with PR15, so I'm not too worried about the structural integrity of that small little piece, but this is ready for some weld through primer. I did already get my patch piece kind of cut to size, so we'll get that put in, get some magnets on here and place it where I think it'll fit best, and then lay some tacks down and get it started. I actually was able to trim this and get some of the weird shapes cut to size with some tin wire snips, I believe is what these are. Just some metal cutters, but nothing heavy duty. So let's get started. Let's get to welding. So there's actually a slight bend to this kick panel here. So with putting this patch piece in, a magnet on the front, at least until I get it tacked in place, is going to bring this level with everything up here versus having it sit too far back. So I'm going to try to get this adjusted as best as I can. See where I'm having problems. I think we're looking okay, about right there. And I might just place a few tacks right down here along the bottom and then start moving this up into place. Taking a closer look at some of the welds, there's a few that I'm okay with. The rest of them, I'm not too sure. Like I'd mentioned in my previous video or one of the other videos, I'm extremely new at welding, so bear with me, guys. I probably will turn up the setting just one. I feel like it's penetrating this piece of sheet metal well, but not so much the bottom here. So I'm going to try to turn it up and see if that gives me a better looking weld. I am going to move on to this top piece and get everything kind of tacked in place. The bottom is pretty flat. I'm just going to start over in this corner, and then for this top gap here, I'm going to use this little tool that I ordered off of Amazon. These two ends are magnetic, and then of course weld does not stick to copper, so I'm going to place that right along this seam here and see if that helps me not burn through any areas. So let's see how well that works for me. I didn't want to bore you guys with all my welding and grinding, but the patch piece is in and their welds are cleaned up for the most part. I'm happy with the final result here. There is of course some little imperfections, some holes and some gaps, but the welds are solid, and some areas turned out a little better than others. But compared to my floor pan section, this one a lot smoother. I did leave the gaps way too big up here and down here as well, so I think that's why I'm getting all these little areas where the weld didn't quite fill the gap. But I'm learning as I go. And then down here at the end, I couldn't really get the grinder and the flap disc in there to take that down, but for the most part, it's pretty flat. I'm just gonna apply some primer for now, and eventually I will do just the light skim coat of Bondo to fill all these little holes in. But I'm definitely happy with the result with this. Now, we're gonna move on to the inside and apply the POR patch. I did apply some here already, and I'm happy with how that turned out. It takes a few days for it to fully cure just because it's kind of a thick bead, but you can apply it right over rust and it is rock hard and solid. So let's move on to the other side. This will just get some primer and then we'll wrap this up. So it's a little difficult to tell with the gloss and the reflection, but I got the POR 15 patch everywhere that I wanted. I started up there at the top, ran it down and focused on the seam where the 90-degree angle there is against the back. And then I also ran some up near the middle there. It's kind of hard to tell, but you can tell kind of a better view there. That bead along the middle is where the top weld was on the patch piece. So I focused all on that up in this corner, and then I ran some up the top there. I first sprayed everything. Well, first I got the POR 15 patch where I wanted it. Then I sprayed some rust reformer, and then lastly some just gloss black just to clean it up. So now we're just gonna weld this piece back in. So on this outside section of the cab, I decided to just use the piece that I had cut out originally and tack that back in place. I used some of the magnets just to center it, and my welds came out pretty good. Of course, I already cleaned them up just a little bit, but this is never going to be seen. It's going to be hidden behind the fender, so I'm just going to keep adding tack welds until the piece is back in. I am going to just leave this rusty section down here at the bottom. I don't think that's really going to matter, and then just in case for some reason anything gets clogged up back here, I can kind of just reach in there and remove it. Down here I did burn a hole through there. I don't know if I just held it in place for too long or the metal's a little thin there, but the welds are coming out pretty good. The gaps are, you know, the thickness of the cutting wheel that I use, so maybe a little bit less gap would have made it a little easier, but these are actually pretty simple welds and they're coming out pretty clean, even without any flap disc there, as you can see that one. So get this finished up and put the fender back on. Alrighty guys, so it's a new day and I had to wash the truck because it had been sitting in the garage for a little over a month and it was just really dirty. But the front fender is back on. I ended up just cutting that piece out of the bottom. Just sprayed some Rust-Oleum, the rust reformer, on it for now. I do eventually want to do like full body work on the cab and all the parts of the truck, so I'm not too concerned with leaving it as is. And then moving on to the inside, got some primer down, and again we're just going to leave that as is for now. That little corner back there where the welds, I wasn't able to clean them up as nice as I would like to. I'm eventually going to get to that. I don't just want to leave it like that, but for now we're all done.